Hello, once again, we're about our focus to the Tom Quayle and Dan Smith Guitar Hour. Hope you guys are good. Hope you enjoyed the last one that we did. What we've decided to do is basically try and have a theme for each of these each time we do them. We're going to try and do them every 2 weeks or so. And the theme for this session, for the first sort of half an hour before we get on to questions, and we've got quite a few questions this time, is basically to do with not trying to run as a guitar player before you can walk. So not trying to do things that are, or not trying to perceive things that are too difficult for you before you're actually ready to do them. Because as guitar players, we're really bad for this, I guess.
Yeah, big time, big time.
It's something, you know, you think of something like technique, for instance, a real simple thing, and we try and play too fast before we're ready, and we think about scales too much, you know, we're obsessed with scales and theory, so on and so forth, as opposed to actually making music with what we've already got and developing the skills that we already have. So I don't know if you want to say anything on that to get us started or anything, but we have a few topics we want to discuss. So I'll let you go first, Dan, maybe.
I sort of forgot where we were going to start now.
Well, we've got the list here. Basically, we're gonna talk quite a bit about how guitarists think about scales, but basically the first thing we wanted to really mention is the way guitarists practice. Trying to be more focused when you practice, and trying to develop a way of, or a systematic approach to practice, so that you're actually practicing something very small each time you sit down with the guitar. We sort of mentioned this a little bit last time when I was talking about how I've been trying to learn, or was trying to learn, the melody for Stella by Starlight, which seemed like a real simple thing that I should be able to already do as a kind of professional musician, but it wasn't something I'd ever done, and I sat down and tried to practice it, and allowed myself just to be very basic with my practice, as opposed to thinking about too many things. So that's really one of the things we want to talk about. We've got a few sort of notes down here. So a couple of things that I've written, basically allowing yourself time and focusing on one task at a time, as opposed to thinking about too many different things. Having sort of, worrying about sort of how valid something that, or knowledge makes you. So worrying about how, for instance, if I know 50 different scales, I'm more valid as a musician. It's just not the case at all. There's plenty of musicians out there who know no scales and know no names of scales, and they're exceptionally valid musicians and get a lot out of, or we as guitar players and musicians get a lot out of their playing. So I think that's really important. So we'll talk about that. A sort of ratio that becomes unbalanced with guitar players between knowledge and actual musical level. So again, same sort of thing.
Of usable knowledge. Right?
Usable knowledge, yeah. So how much knowledge do you have that you can actually utilise in a playing scenario? Not just, I've read a book and I understand what a Dorian flat 2 mode is. Can I use it in a musical context, and do I understand how it should be used and how it functions, and can I actually find that and make music with it all over the guitar? So not validating yourself by the amount of knowledge you have, but by how you're able to utilise that knowledge and how useful that knowledge is to you. So that's again something we'll talk about. And yeah, again, just similar kind of things. So the last thing I've written here before we get into specific examples, there's a big difference between knowing something and being able to express yourself musically with it. And again, guitar players, I'm sure you sort of agree with this, guitar players get very bogged down in knowing things in here, but not necessarily here, or in the ears, as it were. So I think that's quite an important thing. So the first thing we wanted to talk about was modes and scales and guitarist obsession with those. I don't know if you want to open up with it. I've just talked for ages, so maybe you should.
No, it's all fair game. I mean, the mode thing is I mean, everyone, the people that are watching this, is if you sort of sit down and say, how many modes do you know? How many scales and modes would you say you know, in terms of different names? Can you play them everywhere? I mean, regardless of how well you can play them, but how many do you know how to play? And it might be, say, I don't know, say 30, 40, whatever. But then sort of say to yourself, honestly, how many of those do you use? And then the number will obviously get smaller. And then how many of those do you think you can use effectively? And then it will probably end up being more like 5, maybe, like 5 or 6 probably. I mean, we've talked about this kind of thing all the time. There's scales that I know, but I'm not in a position where I can just use them in improvisation, or I'm comfortable with them everywhere.
Yeah.
So I sort of leave them in the background, and you don't want to sort of be that guy that does it and then embarrasses yourself because you don't know it. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
it's a weird thing because
obviously you need to go out there and try and do it to get used to it.
I may be wrong about this, and if I am, please feel free to write in the comments below. But I think scales and modes books. I don't know why we have the term scales and modes anyway, but I guess I do. You know, modes of scales, but I think it's unique to guitar players or perhaps guitar and bass players.
if you ask like a sax player what mode was that?
Well, no, not necessarily just that, because they will be able to tell you usually. But this thing of buying a book, a scales and modes book.
Yeah, it does sound pretty ridiculous. And it all seems like sort of almost computer generated. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like, here are the options in a big formula.
Yeah.
And it's not very human. You know what I mean? It's all a little, you know.
I mean, they are. Excuse the socks, by the way. I've just had a text message from a friend of mine saying nice socks. They are. There's no getting away from it. Scales and the modes of those scales are very, very important. But it's kind of the way that guitar players tend to think about them as. Maybe I'm sort of speaking to the preaching to the converted with some of you guys, but as the be all and end all of music, scales and arpeggios. I mean, the arpeggios in a way are almost more relevant. But you know, if we just take scales for example, it's knowing the reason why you're learning this information and being able to apply it in a musical context. So if we take, because we've written down modes as being a very particular kind of thing that guitar players talk about a lot.
Two other guitar players,
yeah. I mean, it's not something I talk to other musicians about. You know, it's a guitar player centric conversation. You don't tend to talk to piano players or sax players about this stuff. It's just a given that you're playing music and you don't tend to discuss it. But you know, the number of times that you'll actually play something in, for instance, C Lydian, for example, is quite rare. There are a few composers, so I can think of a few things. So an example I use a lot when I was doing a lot of teaching was, if you think of a song that we all know probably relatively well that's kind of based around a mode, you can think of something like The Riddle by Steve Vai, or Flying in a Blue Dream by Joe Satriani, and they're specifically written around a particular chordal sound.
But in a particular style as well.
Yeah, exactly, in a particular style. So like Flying in a Blue Dream, I'm trying to remember the actual chord. I think it was something like that. I did know at one point the that's it. Thank you for the reminder there.
I'm not even like
doesn't really work in standard tuning.
Guy you'll ever meet as well.
But that is obviously, if your ears are sort of up to scratch with modes, that's obviously a Lydian mode. In this case, it's a C Lydian. And with The Riddle, Steve Vai, it was an E Lydian. It went to Lydian dominant, I believe, as well. And there were specific riffs written around those specific modes. And in that case,
it's like a pad. It's like a sound. It's not just. Like an entire thing. It is literally that sound that goes across, and then you can put that on top.
Right.
So the sound is happening all the time.
Yeah. So there's
the sound is going up the whole time. Do you know what I mean?
And I'm trying to remember what. It just moves down a tone, I think, for Flying in a Blue Dream. There's other chords in there as well, but that initial melody is based around two Lydian modes, sort of juxtaposed against each other, down a tone and back up a tone, which is basically how modal jazz worked as well. But 9 times out of 10, when you're playing a piece of music out of standard repertoire, or let me think of something like Andy Timmons. If you've got the Electric Gypsy, those kind of chord progressions. Sorry, where does it go to? It goes to B minor. Those kind of things, they don't really require that kind of thinking, modal thinking. And it's quite rare that you'll be in a scenario where you'll just be using one mode for something. So actually knowing that mode is less relevant than being able to make music out of your existing knowledge, as it were. But we seem to get very obsessed with knowing all of our modes all over the fretboard, having 3-note per string modes down all over the instrument, so on and so forth, so we can kind of shred up and down them. It's just not as relevant as being able to make music out of what you already know. So your pentatonic material and your major and minor scales, if you sort of like to think in that way.
I think it's definitely reliant on the harmony thing. Like you said, I saw that crazy video the other day that was like 45 scales in one. He loves it, really. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious.
Yeah, it was, it was like 45 scales in one solo or whatever. And the first few, it was, it was sort of going 1, 6, 2, and if you're playing in one key, I don't know anyone that, like, if I'm playing, if I'm going
a basic 1, 6, 2, 5.
I'm not thinking major. I'm not thinking Ionian, Aeolian, Ionian. No, nobody thinks like that.
No.
Well, I mean, it's.
What I am thinking, and this is really relevant. So if you just take the first 2 of those chords, G to E minor, and obviously we're not talking in a jazz or fusion-based context here. We're talking in a kind of just general kind of rock or pop or whatever kind of context. I am thinking about chord tones, obviously.
Yeah, I mean they're kind of the same.
And you also
they're kind of the same sound anyway.
You also need to be aware diatonically of, let's say for instance that G. The first G chord you've got there, chord 1 in the key. So obviously you want to be aware of what intervals within the key of G fit over the 1 chord. You don't necessarily have to think all the time G major the scale. But you notice there's certain notes that they all, certain notes have more kind of or work better over the chord, and we're all aware of this as chord tones. So you're primarily focusing on the 1, the 3, the 5, and maybe the 7. The 2 or the 9 sounds particularly nice on a 1 chord, and this is information that you kind of gather over time from playing. So if you play the chord, but we can hear that wants to pull back down to the 1 or up to the 3. The 7 sounds quite nice, but again that wants to resolve.
More relevant
if the 7th is in the chord, obviously, which it wasn't previously. If the 7th is in the chord, I can quite happily sit on it. If the 7th isn't in the chord, I'll need to resolve. But if you only think about scales, as in the major scale, you may be limiting yourself. So for instance, I also know with my ear and from playing experience that I can play the sharp 4. Now some of you may immediately start going, Lydian, it's Lydian. But instead of thinking it like that and thinking of a scale, think of it as a piece of vocabulary. So why think 7 notes when you can think of just 1? You can target that sharp 4 against the root note. Don't think Lydian and play some kind of crazy lick. What I'm going to do is play a piece of vocabulary that I've learned, which goes sharp 4 to the 6 to the 5. Now at no point have I triggered the Lydian. Obviously it has kind of triggered that sound in my mind.
Guitar player in you.
But yeah, the guitar player wants to go Lydian, and I must think of it as Lydian. In actual fact, what's happening is I know this piece of vocabulary, sharp 4 to 6 to 5, and what I'm doing is I'm surrounding the 5th of the chord, in this case the D, which is played here for me at the 9th fret, but for you guys in standard tuning at the 10th fret, I believe, and I'm surrounding it. So if you play the chord for me, Dan. Now if I was to play that as part of a melody, if I come up towards that, so if I go, and in fact rhythmically that wasn't the best resolution, let me try that again. So that sharp 4 interval sounds beautiful in that context if I use it correctly. And I haven't thought about a scale, I've thought about, okay, what interval can I use melodically to create more interest here? And then I'm straight back into thinking about the other chord tones, so the root note, the 3rd, the 5th, and then surrounding them with scale tones, the 9th. In some cases I might use the natural 4. Let me play a phrase with the natural 4 in. So there I surrounded the 3rd. So on and so forth.
And again, this is not thinking scale-wise.
No scales here at all, I'm not thinking
it's
scales.
Almost like sort of the gypsy jazz notion of
yeah.
a tone, the next tone up, semitone behind the note you want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
exactly.
Again, it's just vocab. Really, all you're thinking is that.
And then when we move to the E minor, so the 6th chord, in in my mind, I'm not necessarily thinking, I know that that will be E Aeolian. But what's more important is to know where the chord tones are for the E minor. But again, to be able to identify which intervals against that E fit diatonically within the key. So which type of ninth have we got, or second? And in this case, we've got a natural 9. Again, I don't necessarily identify it and start thinking Aeolian. I'm just thinking within the key, diatonically, what do we have? So I know I can play an F sharp or the natural 9. But again, if I play it, let's play it here. Play the E minor for me. I'll probably find if I sit on that note, my ears are going to want me to kind of resolve to a chord tone at some point.
It does have a bit of a...
It's actually quite nice.
It's nice. It's either like one of those ending things. Do you know what I mean? Like... I mean, just let it sit.
Yeah, absolutely. Or...
This is the thing though, is knowing which interval is going to sound a certain way over a certain chord. You know
Absolutely.
What I mean? That's where like the power is. You know what I mean? With improvisation, you're not just blitzing over a load of scale shapes, whatever that you've used. You know what a certain note is going to sound like over the chord before you play it.
Yeah, I mean,
You know what I mean? So you know what ninths sound like in different situations.
Exactly, and you can practice that by singing. I'm not going to sing now. I can't sing. I'm not going to embarrass myself in front of 70 people. Trying to sing, you know, my horrific. I've got basically with my voice. I have a range of about 4 notes, and then nothing, and then 2 notes up there, and then nothing below, and then a ridiculously low note, and that's it.
Like a broken trumpet.
A trumpet with one valve, basically. It's not working.
He's got the screamers, and then just this.
Apparently he can sing, so we could test him, but we won't test him. But again, just take the chord and try and sing the ninth, and then when you sing it, really listen to how it reacts against the chord, where it wants to go. Does it want to resolve down? Does it want to resolve up? Or does it sit well on its own? Try and get used to all this information. And even if you never reach the stage where someone says to you, okay, here's a chord, sing me the ninth, at least what you know is that when you hear the ninth, you can react to it. Even if you can't immediately identify what it is, you have an instinctual reaction to it. And that's really important to be able to do that. And also be able to play the right kind of ninth over the 6th chord, the right kind of 6th. Or these are the extensions, the 9th, 11th and 13th, or 2nd, 4th and 6th over each of those chords. Is really important to be able to hear those. So again, in this context, this kind of functional harmonic context where we're dealing with chord progressions within a key, don't worry too much about kind of thinking modes. But we can deal with other scenarios, and we will deal with those shortly. Although I would imagine we're going to run vastly over time again and not get through even half of this stuff. An hour doesn't seem long enough. Although if I say that, people ask us to do even more. So, you know, it's really important that you're not always just thinking about scales. And we could kind of take that a little bit further by talking about...
It gets to that point where you go, a chord will come up, or a progression, and then you go, I know that scale, and you'll play it, and you'll be like, why does that not sound right? Why does that not sound good? Do you know what I mean? Or like the Aeolian thing, you get to the point where if you've got an E minor, you'll be going, and you're like, why does that not? Do you know what I mean? Why is that not right? It's the right scale. Why does that not sound right? And you know, you'd be like, I don't know why. It's all the right notes. I mean, and it's
again, it's that thing of, you know, knowing something visually is very different to being able to utilise it in a musical manner. And just because you know the shape of something on the guitar doesn't mean that you can make it sound nice. Again, I mean, what Dan's talking about there is on the E minor, if it's a 6th chord in the key of G, the flat 6, which occurs within the Aeolian scale. Again, some of you guys may be completely familiar with this, and if you are, great. If you're not, the flat 6 within the key, within the scale, in this case the note C, if you play it against the E minor chord on its own,
it really wants to go. Think of a
Doctor Who. So I mean, but there's a great example of where it's used melodically but it resolves down. Now the deal here is if you know the shape of the scale but you're not familiar with the way that certain notes pull or sound against the chord, some people would call this an avoid note, this flat 6. I certainly wouldn't call it an avoid note. I'd call it a note that should be dealt with care and resolved properly. But the thing is, if you go through and you understand intervallically what this is against the chord, and you understand that on minor 7 chords, a flat 6 interval has to be handled with care, that's a much better scenario to be in than being the scenario where you just know the Aeolian scale, the E Aeolian or natural minor scale, and you basically treat each of the notes with equal precedent because they all occur within the same shape. That's not necessarily a good scenario to be in. It's a good scenario if you've never played scales before. Obviously, you need to start by learning a particular scale shape in order that you can identify where the notes are and then subsequently the intervals. But eventually you want to get away from that way of thinking and start thinking more about, okay, where's the root note? Where is that flat 6 and how does it sound against the chord? And also, can I incorporate it into the chord to make it work as a melodic note? And you can do that. So I mean there I've got the minor 7, I've actually got the root note, the flat 7 and the minor 7, minor third or flat third from the chord, which makes it minor 7. But I've replaced the 5th with the flat 6. And in that way now if Dan plays that 6 on the flat 6 on the top, it now sounds fine, it sounds nice and melodic. And again, this is much more interesting and relevant information than just knowing the scale for the sake of knowing the scale. Again, this is the thing of not trying to run before you can walk. Try and assimilate all of the intervals and the musical reasoning behind the scale if you're going to learn it. Don't just learn it for the sake of saying, I know the Aeolian scale. It's really important that you don't do that. And the same thing goes, I mean, we could talk about this for hours, but the melodic minor scale and its modes. You know, with fusion becoming more popular these days, more guitar players are learning their melodic minor modes and their harmonic minor modes as well, which, you know, I tend not to use so much. I don't even on a daily basis kind of remember what they all are. And we were talking about this before.
Yeah, it's one of that again. It's one of those things. Is like ask yourself, you know, it's cool to sit down and learn stuff, but you sort of got to ask yourself, when would you be using that? Unless you're in a very specific situation where you're writing like maybe crazy kind of proggy dream theater type stuff, and you've got, you know, these kind of modal things coming up, then you know it might be useful. But if you're still struggling with other stuff, you know, going and learning loads of really crazy modes is not really going to be that beneficial. And if you're not going to use them, you might spend a week learning them, and then you move on to something else. A week later, you forget what they all are because you've not used them.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's knowing the context and the reason why you need to use them. I mean, a good example of this that we were talking about before was if you look at just the blues. And in this case, I'm slightly more jazz-oriented blues. So if I just play through the chord progression, it's the blues that's got the 1-6-2-5 turnaround on the end. So the that kind of a blues. What a lot of guitar players will do, and you know, I teach this in my lessons as well, I have lessons on my website that teach this stuff, is when you move from the 1 to the 4, you can prepare that movement in bar 4 by playing G altered, the 7th mode of melodic minor, in this case A flat melodic minor, over that 5 chord. Which is all well and good, knowing that piece of information is great, except if you're in the scenario where you can't actually play simple material over that blues and outline the changes. That's sort of, again, it's this thing of running before you can walk. The first thing you want to be able to do is play very, very simple material over that blues and outline those changes so that you're confident in outlining the sound of each of the chords. And that's really simplistic material that we need to focus on. So when you're practicing, don't worry about all of the complex harmony that you could add into the blues to make you sound more sophisticated than you perhaps actually are at that stage. And that's not, you know, you shouldn't look at that in a negative way. It's this thing, we were talking about this earlier on, of knowing what to practice is very, very empowering. And having a good system of knowing, this is the thing I need to do next, or I'm not very good at this, so I need to practice that. And if you're in the stage or in the scenario where, let's say we take those chords, the first chord is G7. And if you can't play 2 notes immediately that outline the sound of that chord, then when the next chord comes up, the C7, followed by the next G7. Now, if you want to add in, that doesn't necessarily need to happen until you're comfortable outlining the sounds of those chords. So if we've got, let's say I do this with the click. So that's on 2 and 4. So 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So in terms of being able to outline that chord progression with simple material, chord tones, and a little bit of pentatonic information, you know, that's much more important than being able to shred around that 5 chord. You know, it's much more important to be able to do the former than it is the latter. And if you're at the stage where you're thinking, okay, I just need that altered dominant down in order that I sound a bit more sophisticated over the blues, but you can't outline the changes in a simplistic manner like that with the click on 2 and 4. I'm doing it in a kind of jazz oriented swing feel kind of way, but if you wanted to do it in a kind of funk context or something straight groove based, you know, if that's a struggle for you, that's step 1. That needs to be sorted out so that you can literally play 2 notes on each chord. So on and so forth, you know, simplistic material. I don't think I played any double time stuff, as in 16th note based material. It was all very, very simple, melodic ideas basically that were just based around not thinking about scales at all. At no point did a scale enter my brain there. It was just, where's the root note? What intervals can I play? You didn't hear me play any, you know, any of that scalic information that's presented as a scale. It was all very melodic, hopefully, all very melodic. Good time feel, again, hopefully, so on and so forth. Good comping from Dan.
Hey.
You know, and again, this is the way that you need to start thinking in terms of your practice. So you could practice this again if we focus on how you can actually practice this material.
Just take one interval at a time or
Yeah.
something, like do the thirds and sevenths thing, so instantly if you play, you should be able to hear.
So that was the third and the flat 7.
Yeah. And then, you know, pretty close stuff. But then maybe if you want to do the altered thing, just add an interval into...
Like the flat 9 is usually a good one to go for. Yeah, so...
Or surrounding the third, that's always good, you know, and the thing is, it sort of buys you an extra note. Do you know what I mean? If you go, let's say, if you go, and you get to there, and you've got a note left, you're like, the third's here, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? You just add one in.
An extra note rhythmically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll play the phrase, I'll play the chords over the top.
Oh shit, sorry, I did that again.
Yeah. So I mean that's the general premise. I mean again from a real basic practice perspective, the first thing if I've got students who are, it's quite rare actually, who want to play that specific kind of, you know, more jazz-based blues, but this goes for anything. And again, any standard you wanted to learn, start by playing over the whole thing, playing nothing but root notes, but play them all over the guitar. So, for instance, if I was going to play this blues, could you play the chords for me again?
Yeah.
Exactly the same sort of progression. We'll stick, just for the sake of having the time feel, so you guys get what's going on time feel wise, I'm going to have the metronome on 2 and 4 again. Hope you can hear the metronome right. So this is just root notes, okay? 1, 2, 3, 4. And again, the important thing there in terms of actually making it musical just as root notes was that there was a bit of phrasing in there and the time feel was solid. I was trying to be interesting, reasonably interesting rhythmically, but as an exercise you could just go. So when you're comfortable with that, then you can start playing roots and thirds, then roots, thirds and fifths, roots, thirds and fifths and sevenths, so on and so forth. Maybe just target one of those intervals. So play root and third, then play root and fifth, then play root and flat 7. You don't have to play the root, but just use it as a visual reference. So if I was going to play just sevenths, we'll do this relatively slow so you can see what's going on. So over the G7, then over the C7. And I'm not playing the root note, I'm just visualising it to help me find where the 7th is. Then if we go back to the G, let's play the altered version, not going to make any difference. Back to the C, let's have the diminished. You've got to play the right 7th. Back to the G, then down to the E, and then the A, then the D, then the G, E, A, D. Let's play the open C.
I think it's good to sort of buy yourself a bit of time as well, because if you're just doing a couple of notes, you can be thinking about ways of getting to the change that are a bit more interesting, so you can set it up. Do you know what I mean? So you can be like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You can sort of playing a bit, and then you've got that space to be like, how am I going to get to the next chord? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can be thinking ahead rather than like, you know what I mean, playing loads of, you know.
It's a lot easier to connect small pieces of information than it is to connect large 6-string long pieces of information. You know, if you're thinking G mixolydian followed by C mixolydian, you know, so on and so forth, followed by, if we do the C sharp diminished, sorry, it's too much information to think about, you know, there's too many notes to deal with there. So you just have to think more simplistically, basically. And this is, again, this thing of trying to run before you can walk.
It's a control thing as well, I think.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're playing less notes and you know exactly what you're playing when you're playing it, it's the control of, and it's not just that, it's knowing that you're going to be right. Do you know what I mean? It's that removing doubt. You never want to be playing pick a fret during a solo. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to be getting there and like, that thing of, is this note in the scale, and then you play it and it's not.
Yeah.
That's like the worst.
Well, again, it comes back to that flat 6 thing over the Aeolian. You know, if you just think about the scale, you can look at that and you can say, okay, that's in the shape.
Yeah, that
should
should work.
work.
Cause then
And then go, oh my word, why does that sound so bad? Same thing can happen with a lot of scale, you know, with almost any scale. You can see the shape, pick a note that you think is correct because it's in the shape, it just doesn't sound good. You've got to be, you know, there's a little bit more kind of information required, and a little bit, you've got to step back and kind of learn the scale more in depth.
it's almost like learning how to use certain intervals, you know, and like going through each one, and like again knowing how it's gonna be before you do it, sort of, rather than learning these rules that say, yes, this chord you can use this scale.
Yeah.
Because guys will do that and go, right, I know this scale, what else can I use over that chord? What else can I use? What else can I use? And it'll get further and further on, and more ridiculous. And they might not be able to just.
Yeah, I mean, at some point you might, find that you can do this and you can outline the sound of the blues, and you want to use a whole tone scale over the first part of the blues, and it's a specific piece of vocabulary that enables you to play a certain specific sound, and that's fine. But if you can't outline the changes in a convincing way using basic material, forget that whole tone scale, forget the diminished scale, forget the altered scale. All of that stuff has to come later. Again, don't run or try and run before you can walk. And the other thing I would say is, and I think this is really important, it took me a while to learn this, don't worry about a lack of knowledge and a lack of
pressure from the guitar community.
Because again, it's this thing of, knowing what you can't do is extremely empowering, and admitting to what you can't do and not trying to convince anyone that you can do it is very good for you and very empowering, because it tells you exactly what you need to practice, and knowing what to practice and why you need to practice it and what your goals are is hugely important as a musician. If you're sat there thinking, oh, what am I going to practice today? I don't know what to practice. Well, something's probably gone wrong somewhere, because there's so much material musically that you could work on that's quite basic. It doesn't have to be the most complex thing that you can think of. You don't have to always be working towards the fastest, most complex lick that you can play. Try and work on your time feel in a more basic way. And again, we can do a whole sort of session, a guitar hour where we talk about working on time feel or anything, you could do a huge one. And feel free to suggest topics that you would like, longer, wider topics than the questions you guys are putting to us, which we'll get onto shortly. Because again, we're running out of time fast. Don't worry about not being able to do something. Always be aware of, and don't try and fool anyone that you can do something you can't do, because you will get found out at some point, and that doesn't feel good at all. It's not a nice feeling. Just present yourself as exactly what you are. No more, no less. If you can do something, that's fine if you say you can do it. If you can't do something, don't try and convince people you can, because you're going to get found out, and it's not a nice feeling. So being honest with yourself about your abilities and what you need to practice is very, very empowering, and definitely something I recommend highly. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I think it's, again, man, it's just not sort of thinking that there's pressure and stuff, because of the internet and stuff. It's a lot, the world is a lot smaller now. You can have all your guitar playing pairs and mates that'll be posting videos and stuff, but they might post a solo over a backing track that might be one take out of 50. The other 50 might be. I think I asked Levi this actually once about, do you have a lot of outtakes for people making backing tracks and stuff? And it's like, yeah, no, of course. It's people are people. It's not always going to go, bang on, which is fine. Do you know what I mean? Like, we jam and stuff all the time, and then one of us will make a mistake at some point, and it's like it doesn't matter. If you make a mistake, it's a good thing, because then you're actually playing stuff that you're not comfortable with. If you're not making any mistakes, then you're just playing stuff that you know inside out.
It's just a fact of everyday life, making mistakes.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just
And
gonna happen,
one of the thing with the internet is people can put stuff up there and paint an image of themselves. Behind the scenes, they're only going to put they're not going to put stuff they're not very good at on the internet, obviously. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to do that, but don't think that everyone is this seamless, because some guy can do some ridiculous shred thing. Don't think, right, I need to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, just don't compete with people.
No.
It's not worth doing. Apart from yourself, of course, which is a bit of a cheesy cliche, but it is true.
Well, you get more respect by, by playing with someone if you can just go like, and just be like comfortable backing someone up. And it's not so much like if I'm playing chords, I'm sort of not the one that's like, I don't have to worry about playing for you. You can sort of do what you want, and you don't have to worry about. Am I going to play that change in the right place?
Well,
or am I going to play in time? Do you know what I mean? It takes weight off your shoulders.
Again, I think we sort of mentioned this a little bit last time, but there is nothing more cringeworthy and awkward than sitting down with another musician, regardless of what they play, and having a jam, and just time is all over the place. The chordal knowledge is just not there. Those basic things in terms of working on your ability to play in time with a good groove, that's probably the number one, to be honest, apart from anything else. I would much rather jam with you if you can play a C, a C and an E minor or an A minor chord, just those, C and A minor, just those two chords. If you can play them with a good time feel, and stay in time, so I don't have to worry about what you're doing. I'd much rather jam with you than a guy who knows 5,000 chords and can, you know, play tons of standards, but the time is all over the shop. I'd much rather jam with the guy who's playing the more basic material, for sure. And
especially if you're doing any kind of sort of alter D type stuff, if you're putting in the tension and they're not changing when you're going right, you know, play, and then
where
the one is going to be the resolution and it's not there,
yeah.
you just sound like you've spent a load of bullshit.
An interesting thing you'll find if you've never done this and you're not aware of this, this is something to be wary of. If you are the lead guitar player and the chordal player screws up, not necessarily in terms of time, but in terms of they play the wrong chords, 9 times out of 10 it's you that sounds like you've made a mistake.
Yeah, big time. Like if you're with the bass player, if the bass player plays a different note because they have the power at the bottom, you're going to sound wrong.
Yeah.
Every time.
I have quite significant experience of this.
Every time.
Of me sounding horrific on a gig because somebody's played inappropriate chords, or, you know, another thing is inappropriate etiquette, you know, in terms of everyone taking sort of equal length solos and stuff, but that's a different topic for discussion and something that's one of my bugbears a lot. But yeah, I mean, good time feel, being able to hold a groove down, hugely important, way more important than the number of scales or the number of chords that you know.
You can play
you know, if we were going to play in E minor, for instance, and you only knew this chord shape, if you can. Perfect, no problem for me. If you can. That's fine as well, but if you can. I'm going to be happy.
A little bit more.
Yeah.
A little bit more freedom. Because
Yeah.
it's like, oh right, cool.
No, I mean, not even thinking in terms of how much harmonic freedom they've got. Just the groove is solid.
Yeah.
So you can play over the top of it, and it doesn't have to be complex material at all. I mean,
I prefer in terms of improvisational material, the more rhythmic sort of adventure than harmonic adventure at the moment, because I think that can have a bit more impact. Do you know what I mean? Like if you've got if someone's sort of laying down the groove and it's in a good place, then you can play around with that.
Yeah.
And that will sort of create excitement, rather than if the time's all over the place and then you're playing loads of complicated stuff. It's almost a little bit less. What's the word? Like not listenable, but people can get into it a bit easier. You know what I mean? Like think of something like Superstition. That's not a particularly, you know, ridiculous riff, but it just sort of sits there and grooves along, and then soloing over that is like always fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's
just if the groove's there, it's always fun. It doesn't matter.
If the groove's not there, it's horrendous. Yeah. But I mean, if we really quick, we won't do this for too long because we need to get onto these questions. But can you play something sort of similar? It doesn't have to be the same thing, but sort of similar to what I was playing, E minor based. What I'm going to do is, again, just from the other side of it, if you're soloing, as opposed to, you know, because I know I'm confident with playing with Dan. You know, there's no issues time feel wise. This may be a first, we'll find out. But again, from a simple kind of soloing perspective, if I'm playing just pentatonic, forget all of the other stuff that you could potentially do over this chord. And there's a lot of stuff you could do over this. Diminished scale material, playing outside, melodic minor, Dorian. Just take the minor pentatonic and see, again, before you start to try and run, see what you can do in terms of playing simplistically. How good is your time feel? How is your phrasing working? So we'll have, again, around that kind of a tempo, whatever you want, basically. I'm just going to listen to Dan initially as he kind of plays, and then I'm just going to pick something real simple to play. Now to the 5 chords. Oh. So again, simplistic material. We're not playing anything particularly complex. Obviously, I did, for kind of contrast, I played some more complex material. But initially and throughout, I was playing very simple material. And actually, the juxtaposition that you get between the very simple kind of pentatonic-y is really nice when you kind of play it against. Some of the more complex kind of diminished scale harmony, or I was playing some B altered material in there as well. Again, that's all completely secondary if you can't do the first thing, the primary thing of playing a great sounding time feel over somebody else's great sounding choral time feel, if you like. And you know, I'm using the words great here. Hopefully they were okay. You know, hopefully it was listenable and sounded like the groove was good or okay.
This is definitely something that gets overlooked, the whole thing of where you put a note rather than, you know, how many notes you can put there or what's there, or, you know. Just to think of, like, take any little blues that you've got, even if it's just 2 notes, like that, it could be on the one, like 3, 4, or it could be, if you nudge it over, which I quite like doing, if you're like 1, 2, 3, 4. Instantly, there's like nothing there, but if you just sort of nudge it over, you can do awesome. It anywhere, you know what I mean? Like, and it's nothing that anyone doesn't know, do you know what I mean? We all know that kind of stuff, but
simple.
If you just think about where you're putting it and think about where you could put it, you know what I mean? Instantly it's like, oh, you know, all this other world opens up with stuff that you already know, and you can make stuff that you already know, that everyone knows, sound better than everyone else.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And then people are like, oh, you know, what's he doing there?
And then, you know, later on when you have some of the other vocabulary, because you know that this stuff is in place, you know, you can kill people by playing the hippest melodic minor line that you know, or kicking out some crazy double time chops. And that's all good because the stuff that preceded it and the stuff that followed it is really solid musically. And that's the stuff that appeals to most people. And I'm not saying you should be popularist and not popularist. You should appeal to the masses all the time and try and play the most popular thing you can play. But there is a lot to be said for simplicity and the fact that you can make the most of what you already know, as opposed to constantly buying the book and flicking straight to the back to look at the most interesting thing, the most complex, hardest thing,
the longest
and
name.
avoiding, find the scale with the craziest name and avoid all of the stuff in the book that led up to that point. You know, really, really, really super important. So, with that said, I guess we should get on to some questions because we've taken up quite a lot of time. We'll probably overrun a bit today as well. So, I've got to answer Laurie Monk's question. I don't know if Laurie's watching. I haven't deleted Laurie's question, have I? No, surely not. No, there it is. Laurie asked the question last time and I didn't get around to answering it. I felt bad because I think Laurie Monk is the greatest human being that ever, graced the guitar world. If you've not seen Laurie's blog, Truth in Shredding, definitely check it out. Laurie is an absolute fantastic light for the guitar community. So Laurie asked, I watched Guthrie Govan, Alex Hutchins and Tom Quayle touring, doing clinics and videos, but it appears you don't have time to record original tunes. Do you wish there was more time for creating original compositions? And the answer to that is a definite yes. We have been talking a little bit about when you're a working guitarist, you don't realise until you actually do quit all of the other jobs that you do and start becoming a working guitarist. It actually takes up a lot of your time because you have to practice a lot, obviously, but then working for Lick Library, Guitar Interactive magazine, doing all of these clinics and shows around various parts of the world, then working on my lessons and my website, doing teaching, takes up quite a lot of, a significant amount of time. When you've done all of that, there's not masses of inspiration left for composing, or that's at least the way it works for me. And actually, I have written quite a lot of material recently. So I am still working on my original tunes and on my album, and at some point it will come out. And I know I've been saying this for a very long time, but there's other things that have kind of overtaken at this stage, and will at some point become priority number one when I get more time. But it's very true, Laurie, and I think probably Alex and Guthrie are in the same position, if not significantly more so than me. In fact, definitely more so than me. Trying to find the time to write stuff that you're happy with is quite difficult. Especially if, like me, you come from an improvisational background, you get very picky with the stuff that you write. So hopefully that answers that question, Laurie. I don't think we answered this last time. Justin Bulmer, if we did, I apologise. Favourite influences? Go.
Well, it's sort of changed recently. No, because of that.
Mariah Carey.
Oh, yeah, she's got the chops.
Probably best not to go down that road.
At the minute, Jonathan Kreisberg, he's kind of sort of doing the rounds a little bit, kind of getting into all that kind of stuff. Kurt Rosenwinkel, getting into him a little bit. In terms of fate, I mean, it's sort of it does change over the years. I used to first started, I thought like Kurt Cobain was like the best guitar player in the world when I was like 14. Well, it depends on who's watching them. You might be like, yeah, what's wrong with that? No. Strings.
Yeah, that's why I had to play an F.
That's where you got that tuning from, really. That easier. Yeah, you sort of go from one to the other, but I mean, I did Paul Gilbert for quite a while. When I was like 15, 16, I got given...
Sorry, I won't quote all of the people that you mentioned.
I got given all of the Guns N' Roses back catalogue when I was like 15, and I was like, what? This is it? There you go. It's like a lot of phones ringing.
Yeah, sorry.
Trade show.
Bizarre.
I can't remember where I went from there.
So yeah,
probably Kirk Hammett at one point, but...
Okay.
Oh, whenever I did the vibrato challenge.
No. Well, we'll see if we get time. I would love to do it.
I don't know where I went from there. And then you get into Steve Vais and stuff like that, and then you sort of... And then went to Bluesy Guys, and then recently started getting into Brent Mason quite a lot at the minute.
Yeah, amazing.
So, growing up guitar playing, a nice balance of kind of a lot of styles really. Not straight up jazz, but I don't know, it's got all this other stuff going on. Tone wise as well, it's a bit more, I don't know, rather than sort of standard jazz tone, it's kind of got that Telecaster stuff, so it's a bit more...
It's different to the sort of Ted Green Telecaster thing as well. It's
more
country influence, but slightly rounder tone.
He's had a lot of... Jim Hall as well. I went to Jim Hall quite a bit. I was listening to Brett Mason on the way here, and he had some... the first tune on Smoking Section,
right.
I think it might be called Smoking Section.
Yeah,
actually.
I think it is, yeah.
Sounds proper like a Jim Hall tune.
Right. I've got it, I just haven't listened to it for a while. Yeah, he's amazing. Okay.
That's pretty much it in a minute.
From my perspective, I'll just go through the ones I'm into now as opposed to the earlier influences because they've been, written about quite a bit on a few interviews and stuff. So, but yeah, Alan Hines, massive fan.
Oh yeah.
And then Brett Garsted, obviously. Martin Miller, big fan.
Oh yeah.
So these are guys that I'm listening to at the moment. Obviously, Martin's a good friend of mine. Who else? Yeah, Kurt Rosenwinkel, Kreisberg, Adam Rogers, obviously. Oz Noy, the man is a genius, a comedy genius as well. I was lucky enough to spend some of last summer with Oz Noy, and the man is an absolute genius. It's phenomenal. Definitely get Oz Noy's albums, they're absolutely ridiculous. Definitely from a blues perspective, which is something I'm getting more into, the more weird stuff that Oz does, which is phenomenal. Who else do I listen to? So lots of piano players, Keith Jarrett, big Bill Evans fan, and then lots of sax players, Chris Potter, let's think, Eric Harland, drummer, unbelievable, a big Hadrian Farad fan as well. which is why when I played with him at Music Mess, I was absolutely bricking myself. It was the scariest thing ever.
Ridiculous.
So yeah, lots of guys, lots and lots of fusion and jazz guys. Scott Henderson, obviously, big fan. Alan Holdsworth, all the usual stuff. So you guys are
Oh, Mark Lettieri as well.
Mark Lettieri, yes, very nice guy
Yeah.
and a very great player. Okay, next one. Hey guys, this is from Jordan Perks. I met Jordan at the Spanish guitar retreat last year. Jordan's a really, really nice guy and a good player. Hey guys, last year I spoke to Tom briefly about chord substitutions and loved the sound of a Phrygian chord as the 5 chord in a standard 2-5-1. I'll talk about what that is in a second. Any other favourite subs for that progression or others? Any recommended reading for that? Cheers both. Jordan, actually weirdly you should ask this question because in the next, or maybe this issue of Guitar Interactive magazine, I've got a lesson on this exact subject about substituting the 5 chord, so check that out. I'll just run through a couple really quickly. What I'm going to do is use a 2-5-1. I'll get Dan to play the chords and I'll play the scales over the top. Now this is where we're going to talk about scales, but again, if you're going to do this stuff and you're going to look at these scales in context, remember these are 5 chord resolving scales, so they resolve to a 1 chord, in this case C, so these are all going to be based around G, and before you start running these up and down the guitar, again, have a really good listen to them, learn what intervals are in them. You'll need to kind of find these scales. I have lessons on my website about these scales, or you can find them in any good books, like the Mark Levine Jazz Theory book is the holy bible of all of this stuff. Yes, big time.
Don't sit there and read it all the way through. Well, you could do if you want to, but
it's a good read actually, I think.
but
But I'm a sad person. So the first one, let me do the Phrygian one very briefly. So believe it or not, normally Phrygian chords are chord 3 within a key. I don't want this to become too much of a kind of standard lesson, as it were. Neither of us do, but I'll go through these because Jordan asked, and then these will hopefully be useful to a few guys. And again, check out Guitar Interactive magazine. So 2-5-1 in the key of C, D minor 7 to G7 to C, all within the key of C. We're going to substitute the 5 chord for a Phrygian chord. Now normally Phrygian is chord 3, but what Phrygian does is it contains a flat 2 or flat 9 and a flat 6. Those are the interesting intervals. So if we play the G, here's the flat 6, here's the flat 2, and I'm going to put the 4 in as well. Okay, and then back to the 1. So we get 2, and then that. You can play that Phrygian natural. No, if you do an A flat triad.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So that sound is G Phrygian, and it will resolve beautifully to the 1. So if you do like,
Okay.
back to the 1. So that's one you can use, and that's the one that Jordan mentioned. I'm going to show you one more because we're running out of time, so I can't take too long over this question. A really nice one that I really like is the 5 chord. If you take, well, let me show you one really quick that you can do. If you take that Phrygian scale, instead of playing the flat 6, play the natural 6 instead. This is the second mode of F melodic minor. It's called Dorian flat 2. So you get G Dorian flat 2. Which would basically mean you play that, you play that that Phrygian chord, but you put that natural 6 in the chord, okay, which will give you the note E basically in the chord. So we get, if you just play the chords, no groove, just the chords. So that one works nicely as well. The other one, really quick, that I'll show you is, and again, these are in Guitar Interactive magazine, the current issue, I believe, if you check that out, is you can play a major 7 sharp 5, which is mode 3 of melodic minor. In this case, E melodic minor. So G major 7 sharp 5 is your 5 chord. So we would have D minor 7. I'm not sure why I played that so fast. Let me do that slower for you. Yeah. And then to the 1. So that's a nice one as well. So the major 7 sharp 5, you will play Lydian augmented, which is E melodic minor, or the 3rd mode of E melodic minor. Okay, enough theory, done. Hopefully that was useful, Jordan. Right. Okay, so Ollie Pickering again. Ollie, good work.
Sky.
I thought it would be cool if you could talk a bit about how you both practice improvisation and perhaps how you come up with interesting new lines, scales or shapes or arpeggios. Cheers, Ollie Pickering. Thanks, Ollie. I don't know. I've talked for ages, so I'll let you.
It might sound counterproductive, but in terms of creating more stuff from improvisation, is you want to take things away from yourself.
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah. Limitation.
Yeah, like if you say, right, I'm just gonna use. If you try, like I say, we try and get into the other thing. Maybe just think, right, I'm gonna take the 3rd, so we're in G, flat 7, and then the root, and then just add stuff to that. So instead of being like, right, trying to do this whole scale thing, you can be so you're just adding some
so you had just the flat 9.
Yeah, so you've got 3rd, 7, root, flat 9, and then just play with those intervals, and just in one place as well, so you can find them all.
So you're making the most out of the material that you've got in that small space, as well as being able to make sure you can find it.
Yeah, exactly. Either, I mean, we might do this card thing at some point, but things like limitation exercises, so only using a certain area of the fretboard. I'm sure we all have weak areas. I mean, I talked about this last week. You'll have areas where, you might not be able to see things as clearly, so work on those, and then maybe say, right, I'm only going to use 2 strings, and then maybe combine both, so you can only use 2 strings and the 5 fret limit. So then you've only got certain notes to work with, and then you might be relying more on rhythms and such like that. Just combining very small elements and basically exploiting them until you're sick of them, rather than being like, right, I'm going to go this scale and just try and blitz over it everywhere, put a vamp on or whatever, and try and do it. You want to do small little things and really, really just hammer it.
Yeah.
I think someone told me that I think Scott Henderson does something like this.
Right.
They'll do something small and then hammer it, so then he's got it, rather than doing loads of different things and then having one little thing. I think. Okay, I mean, limitation thing is
I think limitation exercise is brilliant. And I could add probably 1 or 2 other things in there. One thing I would definitely recommend is that you check out either Daryl Gable or Tim Miller's material. I mean, they're not the only guys who talk about this. I mean, I talk about it a little bit as well, but they have very, very good material on this, where they, if you're talking about finding things within the fretboard where you already know the fretboard well, so you've got no problem finding the notes, but you want to arrange things differently and come up with new information. Specific numbers of notes per string, so 3, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3, 1, 3 systems, or 2, 1, 2, 1, for instance. So if you've got A minor pentatonic, 3 on the first string, then 1, then 3, then 1, then 3, gives you a specific kind of sound. That's a nice way of doing things. Or 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, where you arrange the the notes in a specific way. It doesn't have to be a scale, by the way. I mean, you could play. Give us an A minor 7 chord. That was 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So that's a good way of doing things. And again, Daryl Gable's got phenomenal lessons on all of that, as well as his ridiculous technique. Daryl's an amazing player. Check him out. If you're listening, Daryl, hello. Thanks for watching. And then the other thing that I would recommend you do is something I do a lot, which is basically very slow fretboard exploration where you are fully in control of the next note that you choose, so you're not using muscle memory. It's not necessarily the way I play when I improvise all the time, because you rely on muscle memory a lot. But if you've got that A minor 7 chord, if you pick well, not even a subdivision, you could play completely rubato, but be very in control of note choice. So you might play so slowly, yeah, give us... Put the 6 in the chord. I just wanted that note to sound, and you probably want to do that a little, quite a bit slower than that. That would work with any technique as well if you were doing legato. Yeah. As you speed up, it becomes more muscle memory and less note choice. But if you keep things so slow that you can make specific note choices, that's going to help you a lot in terms of developing lines and your ability to see what you're doing on the fretboard. Lewis Spencer. Hi, Lewis. Hi, guys. Just wondering what kind of methods you use in your practice time for coming up with more interesting rhythmical lines. For me, I think I mentioned this last time. If I didn't, I'm imagining mentioning it to somebody else then, is the Louis Belson book. Modern time reading text. Either the odd time signature one or the one in 4/4 is perfect. Just hundreds and hundreds of rhythms written out that you can basically learn to read rhythms a little bit, so you can interpret the rhythms if you can't already read rhythms, and then just improvise with that specific rhythm. So if your rhythm was, we'll use a metronome for this as well. We'll have this clicking on all 4 beats now. So again, we'll do this over A minor, but I'll come up with a rhythm first. So if you had 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say that was the rhythm, and then you solely improvise with that rhythm. And some of them go over 2 bars, some of them go over 3, 4, some of them are very short. So da 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 da, any kind of A minor groove. Da 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 da. Resist all temptation to change the rhythm, because what you're doing is you'll find, like for instance, I was bending into some notes. You'll find different ways of interpreting that rhythm, and that's the key. It's again, like Dan was talking about, limitation exercises, but now for rhythm. Then when you feel you've exhausted that rhythm, move on to the next one, and what you're doing is expanding your rhythmic vocabulary as time goes on, basically.
You'll come up with more interesting stuff in your head. I think we mentioned it a little bit last time, was it's being aware of all the things that you can play rhythmically. So being aware of, if you want to put a triplet in, you can just do it and then put something else in and put something else in, and stacking all these little things together. But again, building your way up. And I think a lot of like drum fills as well. Imagine how a drummer would do a drum fill, but then try and interpret that in notes.
Yeah, I mean,
you know what I mean? Or things like if they do like a little flam, like. You know what I mean? Like just little expressions.
Yeah, little things, nuances that work in there. The other thing you could do is you could do the Wayne Krantz thing. It's not a Wayne Krantz thing, but it's what he's known for. Playing, rhythms that are in 3, for instance, over a 4 idea. So you might have we've got 3 against that beat, 3/8 rhythms. So you could have. It's 3/8, so we got da da da. Sorry, I can't say that at the same time. So da 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 da. So each of those is 3/8 notes long. If you have the groove again, same kind of deal. that's a nice system to use as well. And again, check out Wayne Krantz's website if you want to get more into that. There's tons and tons of stuff. Or the Jerry Bergonzi Inside Improvisation series, the one on melodic rhythms, is very, very good for that kind of thing. He calls it hemiolas as well.
Listen to more of those kind of plays as well. I mean, like, we mentioned all these books and resources, but you can't be sort of just listening to someone that's really got that rhythmic,
is on it,
sort of, that rhythmic control to just do whatever they want. Think of someone like John Schofield, who his phrasing is just sort of, kind of puts it where he wants it, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting.
Some of the material is not really, it's not really that far out, but rhythmically it's just.
Because I mean, he's got that interesting. Some of the notes are like ghost notes.
Yeah.
And then pushing the note. Not that I can sound like John Schofield, but that's certainly one way of getting that, just to push it off the end like that. A few people, including Mr. Tony Martinez, the Spanish wizard on guitar with the cat, you may have seen his YouTube video where his cat attacks him. Tony is a fantastic guy and a great guitar player. Check out his YouTube channel, Tony Martinez. Question, tell us guys about bad posture for playing or practicing, back issues, etc. Any advice? And there are a few other people who asked about that as well. I'm actually the worst person to talk about this because I have serious problems with my back. I have terrible posture as well, and I've had big problems. About 2-3 years ago, these two fingers stopped working pretty much. They kind of moved, but I could hardly play. Some of you guys may remember. There's YouTube videos that I've got where I was talking about it and how bad it was. It was really hard to play. And actually, these two fingers have never quite recovered from maybe 2 or 3 years ago. They've never been quite as controlled as they were. Although you obviously learn to compensate for stuff like that. And that's because of problems with my neck. I have 2 deteriorating vertebrae in my neck. I also have very bad lower back problems. I can't stand up and play for very long before I get bad backache. George Marios will tell you that. I had a terrible time when I was in Greece with him last time. Really, really bad backache. So my recommendation would be look after your posture. Sit properly. Don't slouch if you can avoid it. Make sure your strap is correct. Don't do stupid things with having your guitar around your ankles if you don't need to. Just watch it basically, because you can do yourself really bad injuries and it can cause big problems with your vision. My vision had problems, bad headaches, all sorts of aches and pains. It's just not worth dealing with. So make sure that you have a good chair. Some people like to use a stool. It might be a little bit you might see it as a little bit sad, but it's better to look after yourself. And then when you're playing live, you don't need that stuff. But when you're practicing, good idea to get a decent chair and sit properly, basically. Same when you're standing, don't slouch. And do yoga. Very seriously, yoga is phenomenal for anything like that. If you've got problems, yoga is very, very good. It's very, very good.
I'll start the Warrior 2.
Yeah, you must have done some yoga.
I did a bit of yoga on the ship once.
A few downward dogs.
All about the downward dogs.
All about the downward dogs. So that would be what I would say. I don't know if you've got anything to add to that.
I have terrible posture. I won't go into it, but I have bad posture.
Yeah, look after yourself.
Things like you get more colds and stuff. It's like really bad for your sinuses as well if you have bad posture. You wouldn't think so, but the doctor once told me that I went in there for something and I was kind of sat like this, and he says, it's really bad for everything up here if you spend your life kind of like this. I mean, you want to be more vertical.
Yeah, I mean, there's a thing on the BBC today, BBC News. Make sure you stand up every now and again because sitting down for too long is bad for you. Although if you've got your guitar strap on right and the guitar is at the right angle, actually playing stood up shouldn't feel any different to playing sat down.
Oh, this is quite high, really.
Yeah, I mean, I have my guitar quite high. I mean, Alex Hutchins is the king of high guitars, and he's one of the guys I respect the most musically. So it's got nothing to do with how high you wear your guitar. If you want to have a guitar necklace, so be it. I definitely do.
Richard Coxon says stuff
okay.
Like that.
Ignore the man. Stephen Martin, I promised I'd get onto this question, and it's a very interesting question. Any advice on how to genuinely improvise interesting chord progressions? Now, obviously, Stephen, because I don't know anything about your playing, I'm not sure what level you're talking about here, but I can give you a few tips. One thing you could practice is if you want to improvise chord progressions and not stick to a particular key, i.e. if you're in the key of C, not just have that's all diatonic within jazz context to the key of C. If you want to be more interesting than that and improvise more sort of unique chord progressions, one thing you could do is you could take an existing chord, in this case G minor 7. Now the glue that's going to hold any chord progression together that's non-diatonic is the melody that you play over the top of it. There's also things called weak and strong root movement, but let's not worry too much about that at the moment, because strong root movement is going to give you a better sounding chord progression, but that's for another time. So if you've got G minor 7, play a melody based around the, let's say, Dorian scale, or the intervals from G minor, in this case Dorian. Now wherever you end up, look at that as being the next note, any chord tone or extension for a new chord. So there's loads of different chords that I could play against this. If I stick with Dorian, I could play C Dorian, I could play G Dorian, but I've already played that. I could play A Dorian. What else could I play? I could play E. No, I could play E Dorian. I could play B. I could play A in a different version. So there's loads of different ways. So if I was, for instance, to kind of run through a few of these, so I'm just picking a new, in this case, just Dorian chord in wherever I am on the fretboard, based on choosing a melody note, basically. But I could change the chord type, so I could do the same thing if I start with G minor 7. I'll play a melody again, similar kind of thing. Now if I land on this note again, I could pick a different chord type. So in this case I could play, let's play an F7. Then again, when I've chosen that chord, I'll play a melody. Now again, I've landed on this note here, so I'm going to pick another chord type that fits with this particular melody note. So So you can just move around, basically finding a whatever note you land on at the end of your melody, find a chord. There's loads and loads of different chords that you could play that use that melody, that note as their highest note. And you obviously need to have good fretboard knowledge and good harmonic knowledge, but if that's in place, then you can use that system to come up with a chord progression. And what's working to tie it together is the melody, basically, that you play in between the chords. Of course, if you just want to improvise chords with no melodies at all, well, you know, it's really up to you what you want to do. I mean, you could use theory, but you could just literally stringing chords together because they will work because they're strong sounding structures. So I'm using Lydian chords, Dorian chords, Mixolydian chords, some melodic minor mode chords. Again, the knowledge has to be there, but you can throw them together in any order if they're strong sounding structures.
So that kind of there's kind of two ways of looking at it. You can do it like the first way, which is a bit more less rules. It's just, you know, whatever the top note is, stick a chord on it, and it's going to sound right because the melody's there. Whereas the other side of things, putting stuff together that sounds good, is half that and half having that harmonic knowledge of stuff that will already kind of work, and knowing a few stock substitutions and knowing a few stock things.
It's all vocabulary.
Doing it, yeah, and sort of doing it that way. Depends which sort of way you want to go about it. You kind of learn all these things, and then work on new ways of voicing those progressions so that they don't sound like the standard kind of. You know what I mean? And then you're going about it that way. Whereas the first way is just a free form, just playing. It's kind of the thing I said about it, is if you're learning a new sound or a new chord or a new scale or whatever, play a shape and then improvise on it, and then whatever note you finish on, make that the note of the next chord, but keep the chord type the same.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, it can cover, that exercise alone can cover a lot of ground.
Yeah, I mean, because like Dan's saying, if you're talking from a standard jazz repertoire kind of perspective, if you've got, again, that 1-6-2-5, if you know how to reharmonise, or not reharmonise, but revoice those chords, there's so many ways you could play that chord progression. So for instance, you could take the G major 7 and play the E7, the A minor 7 you might play, and then for the D7 you might play, I don't know, you might play, or even, so you could have,
that's all.
Yeah, it's all that basic. It's that.
Basically the same thing. You got to check out. What is it? Joe Pass. It's one of his videos where basically the whole thing is pretty much just him talking about changing a 1-6-2-5 into like dominance and things like that.
Yeah, I mean you could play it like. Well, be another way of doing it, or I'm trying to think of interesting ways of voicing the. Yeah, you could go. Yeah, there's a good one. Or you could. There's tons of different ways just within that small part of the neck that you could reharmonise. Not again, reharmonise is the wrong word because you're not reharmonising it. You're just using different inversions of the chord,
just arranging the notes differently.
Yeah, it just sounds different. I mean, like the 5 chord, the E7, can be made to sound quite interesting in the right context, but it's still the same harmonic scale.
Symbolic thinking again.
I'm not changing anything about the chord, the scale that the chord comes from. So it's worth learning a lot of theory to go along with that question, but you can, if you want, just take that first system that we used of playing a chord, playing a melody, last melody note, make that the new highest note or middle note or lowest note of another chord, basically. So I think we've probably run out of time, unfortunately, guys, and if your question hasn't been answered, I promise it's being added to the list and will be answered in future episodes of the Guitar Hour that will be renamed to the Guitar Hour and a Half because we can't seem to stick to an hour. I hope it's been useful and interesting, and again, feel free to submit questions, you know, on my Facebook page or on Dan's Facebook page. We'll write them all down. We may not get through them all in one episode, but we'll do our best. And I hope the sound's been better for you this time. I believe it has from one of the messages I've got. I apologise, last time we hadn't really figured it out, but hopefully the sound's been better, you've been able to hear us better. And we will see you next time, guys. Thank you so much for watching. See you soon.